Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis, the host. Oscar Mike means we're on mission. Today I have a new guest. He's never been on the show before, but he's been watching me for a while. Robert Wysocki. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Sometimes I really foobar these. I really do. But Robert Wysocki, welcome to Oscar Mike Radio.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. So how we met, it's always cool how I meet, is a Marine I served with, actually went to Hawk School with. He was in the reserves, but that's how far back this goes. This is what makes the Marine Corps cool, Robert, is a guy I went to school with for, 4 months is still a lifelong friend many years later. Let's just leave it at that. And he's like, hey, he's telling me about, living where you live and the fact that, you're involved with equine therapy. He's like, you got to talk to him. And we chat on the phone. I'm like, wow, there's a lot here. So I just want to thank you for coming on the show.
I appreciate it. Actually, I owe Brian a big thank you for introducing us and introducing me to Oscar Mike Radio. So it's really great hanging around out here. We're out in Wyoming, just a little bit west of Laramie, and it's
Nice.
It's funny where you run into me, wherever you run into people. It's just funny that way.
Especially Marines, it's just,
Yeah.
if you look hard enough, there they are. So
Yep.
You served in the Marine Corps, if I understand it correctly. What did you do in the Marine Corps?
Well, I went in 1980 and started off in admin and intel analysis. And on my first re-enlistment, I moved into counterintelligence, 0211. And I spent, I guess the next 10 years or so on active duty as an 0211. I left active duty in 1995 as a gunnery sergeant, as an 0211, and went into reserves for a couple of years, picked up master sergeant there, and then left the reserves. So I was, the reason I left to begin with is I was deployed for about 6 out of 15 years. Kids were getting at an interesting age and needed to be home. And so, going into the reserves, I thought would be the right thing to do. But in the reserves as an 0211, you deploy as much or more than your active duty counterparts. So they can pick you up and scoop you up, because we're notoriously shorthanded in the 0211 field. Small field and always shorthanded. So
you were getting out as Brian and I were going in. That's kind of it's funny how that works out. And
yeah, rub it in. Go ahead.
No, I'm considered a dinosaur now too. It's kind of funny. But different Marine Corps, I've talked to a couple of you, who served in the 80s, and it wasn't until Beirut and Noriega that the Marine Corps really was kind of on a lull there for a while, and then we're back in the public eye. So we went into Hawk, as you may have known. Brian must have told you, and then we got out. What was the transition like? Because you went from active duty to reserves, we're still at a high tempo. What was getting out actually like, and putting that behind you?
For me, I think I was kind of looking for a soft landing or a longer glide path. That's why I went into the reserves rather than just a cold break. And I went back to school. I did 2 master's programs back to back over 2.5, 3 years. And that whole time I stayed in the reserves, and I could go do 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, 60 days on orders, or that kind of thing. Just enough to remind me of why I wanted to get out in the first place, and be able to go back home and be glad that I left again. But always keeping my hand in the game. And then actually wound up going to work for the government. Worked for Defense Intelligence Agency and a couple other government organizations. And my transition, I put it off, I think, too long, because I really didn't transition for probably 10 or 12 years. Because when you go to work for someplace like Defense Intelligence Agency, you may as well have stayed on active duty, right? Because there's a dress code and everybody has to, and follow the orders of the GS-15s and those kinds of things. So, but yeah, it wasn't until well past the 10-12 year mark where I started to transition and deal more with commercial entities, not just government contractors, but working with the commercial sector and real people in the real world. Now I work for Amazon Web Services, and that's huge difference in government service or military service.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I mean, how does Amazon differ from the government? It'd be very interesting to go down that path for a couple minutes.
Yeah, sure. It's kind of funny. We used to kind of laugh at it, especially at DIA. You keep getting told to think outside the box, but the running gag is, the thing that's unspoken is, don't act outside the box. You can think outside the box all you want to, and we encourage you to, but don't act outside the box. A company like Amazon is exactly the opposite. If you're not innovating, if you're not experimenting, if you're not trying, and even if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. You're not pushing the envelope far enough.
Wow.
And that's a big difference from
Yeah.
a zero defect mentality that we all grew up with, right? Don't fail, don't drop the ball, always succeed, always do better, keep driving. Amazon, Jeff Bezos just left as the CEO. And the whole history of Amazon is built on this idea of, we encourage you to fail, and keep driving forward. So that's a big change.
Yeah, I wouldn't. That is, because you're right. You go from driving those inspection hits down to zero, and if it's so just very different. So when I got to know you or get introduced to you, you're out in Wyoming. And first of all, for those of people who don't understand Wyoming, what's it like? I see pictures and I'm like, they can't be real. It can't be real, but it is, right? I mean, what's Wyoming like?
Yeah, it is surreal in a lot of ways. I think it's the only state in the lower 48 where no two towns touch each other. There's still, I just saw the census results, still less than 600,000 people in the state. And it's just a huge state. We walk out in the morning and I've got antelope and wild horses in the front yard and in the backyard. Last night driving home, I almost hit a badger. So it's a little bit like being on safari in a lot of different ways. Just driving down the road, you see the antelope mixed with the wild horses all down, in near a lake area, or
the deer,
grazing
the low play.
Yep.
But it seems, Brian was telling me, and I've checked it out, because it just seems like you can get off the main highway and you're really either under open sky or you're really in the woods, surrounded by that. It must be a different feeling than being in a metropolitan area, because by comparison, the Boston area where I'm from has about 600,000 people in it, 500,000 maybe, but still, that's in a very small condensed area versus an entire state. You can find yourself, I have to think.
Yeah, you can. And that's one of the reasons we moved out here. Years and years ago, my wife was a Marine as well. We didn't know each other on active duty, and probably just as well, because she was pretty straight-laced and a regular intel officer. She probably would have had me locked up and put away without a key for some of the stuff we pulled in the counterintelligence field. But she went to school for air intel out here at Buckley Air Force Base down near Denver. And that was, around the same time I went in. So 79, 80, around that time frame for several months, and has told herself her whole life when she retires, she wants to come back to Denver. And about 10 years ago, we took a vacation and went back to Denver. And that was as bad as Northern Virginia. The sprawl, the traffic, it was horrible. So we took a ride in a rental car and went all around Wyoming for about a week and a half, and just fell in love with the place up here. It's America 60 years ago.
Does it get as brutally cold as like Maine and Massachusetts get, or is it a different kind of cold? You get a lot of snow. That's one thing Brian wasn't really like clear on.
Yeah, we do get a lot of snow, but it doesn't last long. It's because we're up at about 7,800 feet. It's really, really dry up here. And the snow doesn't last long. So it'll drop, you'll get a foot and a half, but 2 days later, 3 days later, everything's gone. There's probably 300 plus days of 80% sunshine. I was looking at solar power out here, so that's one of the things that we looked at. But yeah, it's a different kind of cold. It's not damp. The wet cold on the East Coast that just cuts right through you.
Right.
Don't have that here. You can deal with the cold out here, and the big challenge is the wind. There's always wind out here.
He was saying that. He's like, I didn't realize what I was getting into. And he's like, not just wind for a couple minutes. He's like, Travis, wind for days.
Yeah.
Which I'm thinking back to Yuma when I was stationed in Yuma, and I'm like, even we'd have wind for like a day come through and mess up everything, but not for days. He's like, it's something else.
Yeah, that's what takes some getting used to, is just dealing with the sound and the feel of the wind going by all the time.
Nice. So you settled in Wyoming, you love it, and you met him, and Brian again is a Marine. I didn't serve with him. We went to Hawk School together, and it's just we've never lost touch. It's really kind of cool. And he tells me, you're talking because I'm involved in equestrian therapy at a board level.
Yeah.
And he tells me that you do things in equestrian therapy, and that's where kind of the connection started. Do you want to talk about that with me?
Yeah, sure. The way it all came together, the place we live is a place called Wild Horse Ranch. It used to be a big sheep and cattle ranch and station. It's been broken up into smaller ranches, and a whole bunch of people live out here, but there's still about 300 wild horses that live here and roam the property. You have to fence them out if you don't want them on your property. So I'm on the board of our Wild Horse Preservation Society, and we were doing a roundup for medical treatment, veterinary treatment, and that's where I met Brian. We started talking. I think I was wearing a Marine Corps t-shirt, and of course he came over, and he was dragging 3 other Marines with him. So we're pretty safe out here, I think. So if the zombie apocalypse rolls through, I think we're going to be okay. We have several fire teams ready to go.
Right.
But we started talking about it, and I was just talking about some of the work that I've done with horses in the past, trying to make some of the other people who had volunteered to work with this roundup a little bit aware of the horses and their sensitivities. Because when I left active duty, I had, I self-medicated for probably 15 years. And then finally broke down and went to talk to some folks. I talked to a psychologist, I talked to a psychiatrist, and, I've got medical treatment, and somebody recommended that I link up with a friend of theirs who was running an equine therapy program and was very interested in working with veterans. So I went out there and spent a couple of 1-hour sessions with a very large Palomino, beautiful horse named Sonny. And Sonny became my therapist. And just within the first couple of times inside the round pen with him, I felt a lot of the load that I was carrying. I tell people all the time, it was like I took off my pack, I put it on the back of the
Wow,
horse, and he walked away with it.
that's
It
amazing.
just, yeah, it was. It was really incredible. Um, and my son actually lived a little bit south of there. This was in Southwest Virginia. My son lived down in Roanoke, and he went into the Marine Corps as well. Um, he was wounded in Ramadi, Fallujah, and that whole thing in 2007. So he and I both came away with TBI and PTS. He took a bullet wound and still has shrapnel from the mortar round that struck the vehicle he was in. So we're both at different levels with it, but that's the one thing we had in common. So I asked him to come up, and I wanted to watch him work with the horses because I needed proof that this was really working, that it wasn't just me sort of being wishful, right? Looking at it and saying, gosh, maybe this will help me, and just thinking that it was helping me. So I watched, he came up and I watched him go through it, and within 45 minutes, I've got some photos of him, but I mean, he showed up and you could see he was dark in his face, right? Everything was tense. Brow was knitted together, always stressed. He hadn't smiled, and gosh, I hadn't seen him smile in probably 2, 3 years. But after 45 minutes or an hour with Sonny, he worked with the same horse I did. It was like 10 years came off his face. He was smiling. He was relaxed. His wife told me it's the first time she'd seen him smile, since he came back. And that was just after 45 minutes or an hour. So just seeing what that did and feeling what it did within me, and then seeing what it did for him, I knew that this was real, right? This isn't just another, it's not snake oil. The equine therapy really works. Equine therapy is a really impactful way to help you get out from under the load you're carrying. So that was what sold me on it. I didn't necessarily want to grow up to be a therapist, so I've become an equine assisted coach.
Oh, you did do that.
Yeah, yeah,
Nice.
yeah. So I work with not exclusively with veterans, but I prefer to work with veterans because I think it's a lot easier for veterans to work with somebody who understands where they've been and what they're going through. So it's
What's that like when you see a veteran who's gone through what you've gone through, and you've done it's PATH, right? Did you do the PATH certification?
yeah, that's
Okay.
one of them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
one of them. Okay, so you've done a
Yep.
certification like PATH or PATH certified,
Hmm.
but more than that, you've lived this, and you've gone
Yeah.
through this, and you put a veteran with that you know rein in his hand, so to speak, and you watch
Yeah.
the change happen. What's going on in your mind, Robert?
Well, I'll give you an example. I was doing some volunteer work before I left Northern Virginia. There was an outpatient treatment program for substance abuse at one of the military hospitals, military medical centers up in Northern Virginia. And I was doing a demonstration project for them. I took a young E6 who, probably 16, 17 years in the service, and was talking with him. And so what I wanted to do was kind of get him to relax a little bit, figure out what's going on in his own body, sort of notice what's happening with him. And then I wanted to take him into a small round pen with one of the horses that we had access to. Her name was Rain. So as I'm talking with him, this exercise, this experience we were going through, I said, do me a favor. I want you to think about and bring an issue into the round pen with us, something we can work on when we get in there. And just sort of casually talking as I opened the gate and we stepped into the round pen, Rain was, directly across the round pen from us. And it was a 60-foot round pen. So she's 60 feet away. She's got her head outside of the panels, trying to reach some of the grass that's outside the round pen. And he and I are walking sort of slowly and just chatting to get to the middle of the round pen. And he turns when we get there, he turns and he starts talking to me, and his back is to the horse. I can see what Rain's doing, but he can't. So, I asked him, what's the issue you wanted to bring into the round pen? What do you want to bring to Rain? What is it you're trying to work on? And he started talking about the challenges that he's facing. He several tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, alcohol problem, lost his marriage, problems getting access and spending time with his kid. And now he's at 16 or 17 years. And if he doesn't make it through this program, he's going to get drummed out of the service, right? There's no grandfathering, there's no 20 years. We're not going to carry you to retirement. So, he's looking at losing everything. And he's really getting emotional while he's telling this story. And I'm looking over his shoulder and I'm watching what Rain is doing. And while he's telling this story to me, and I know maybe she can hear him, maybe she can't, but she pulls her head back into the round pen. She turns around and I can see that she's looking at him. She's paying attention. Her ears are pointed our way. Her eyes are pointed our way. And she starts slowly walking toward us while he's talking to me. And as she does, she comes up and, the two of us are in each other's space, right? But we're not too far away, but we're not too close. She walks up and she comes right between the two of us, just like that. And she stops and puts her shoulder right in front of his chest. And he leans forward and puts his hands over her back and he keeps talking. And the whole time, Rain is just standing there listening, watching all of this happen. And he tells this story and he goes out and, he really gets emotional. So we're in there about 15 or 20 minutes and we turn to leave. And as we turn to leave to walk back toward the gate, Rain walks with us and stays right on his shoulder all the way to the gate. And when he tries to step out, she bends her head around a little bit and catches him by the shoulder as if to say, no, I don't think I want you to leave just yet. You've still got some more work to do. And, I left him in the round pen for a few minutes with her just to pet her and to just sort of relax. And when he came out, sort of debriefing, right? How do you feel? How do you think that went? What are you feeling now? What are you experiencing? And this guy broke into a smile that was as wide as his face. His eyes were full of tears. And I said, what are you feeling now? And he said, hope. For the first time in years now, I feel hope. I feel happy. I feel like I can do this. And, that's probably the singularly most moving and emotional experience I've had working with somebody with a horse in the round pen. And when he said that what he felt now was hope, that just blew me away. Blew me away.
It had to.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And it's my understanding that some people equate canine therapy to equestrian therapy, but it's my understanding it's very, very different. It's extremely different in the execution and the practice. I just know if you'd elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, sure. The relationship between dogs and humans and horses and humans are very, very different relationships. Dogs are pack animals. Horses are herd animals. So it's a subtle difference, but it's a big difference. Within the herd, there's not just an alpha and everybody else just kind of wanders around. There are different roles and jobs within the herd, and they trade responsibilities. Everybody steps up. There are sentinels, and there are nurturer companions. There are leaders. And horses are prey animals. They live their lives out here in the wild anyway. Knowing at any moment they could be the victim of a predator attack. So they've learned to communicate quietly. Dogs bark, dogs whine, dogs run around in circles when they get excited. Horses don't. Horses don't talk when they get threatened. right? They don't whinny because they don't want the predator to know where they are or to know that they're there. So they communicate quietly with each other through changes in heart rate, changes in breathing, and those sorts of things. And that's what makes the ability to bond with a horse very, very different, because they feel your heart rate. They notice your breathing rate when you're in their space, and they'll respond to that. So it's I think, and it's just my own impression of it, but as humans, we're used to being sort of the top of the food chain, the apex predator, right? We eat everything and anything we want because we have a brain and tools, and we can do all that. It's not until you're actually a prey animal that it changes your perspective. And a lot of veterans who go through these events in combat environments and deployed environments for the first time in their life, they may not recognize it, but they're actually prey as well as predator. And that's what I think gives you the commonality with the horse. Is I know what it is to be hunted. I know what it is to be threatened. And in a lot of folks, there's we all have a switch, right? We're humans, we're wired to connect. But in a lot of folks who experience trauma as kids, as I've worked with survivors of human trafficking, once you become prey, the switch is thrown from connection to protection, and you can't unthrow that switch. So you're always looking for that. How do I protect myself? How do I keep my guard up? How do I, where's the threat today?
Right.
That sort of thing. And that's kind of the way horses go through life. They start with the protection switch, and then they look for connection. So it's a big difference between dogs and horses. And horses is it's more spiritual, really, I think.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. And you're doing this still out in Wyoming?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, I've adopted 2 wild Mustangs from Bureau of Land Management Rescue, and starting to work with them, and want to create my own coaching herd, or my own working herd. But there are several organizations here around the Laramie area and the Cheyenne area, a huge VA medical center down in Cheyenne, that I can volunteer with and bring the skills and the capabilities to their equine programs and their horses and their herds to make it more available to veterans in the area.
Man, that's awesome. I mean, and this is one of the reasons why I like doing the Oscar Mike Radio, is someone like yourself who went through, years of service, either got injured or has some challenges as a result of service, still finds a way post-service to separate from that, but still serve, still be there for the person behind you. It's that no one left behind mentality. And,
Yeah.
I have the feeling it's going to be needed more and more. I mean, I'm curious what you think. Is this whole deal in Afghanistan going to lead to a lot of buried and repressed feelings and trauma being brought to the surface?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because actually over the last several days, I've been trading notes with a lot of friends of mine, and it really has brought a lot of frustration and aggravation to the surface, right? What were we doing? What good did we do? What impact did we have? How are we going to stop what's going on now, and what's going to happen over the next couple of months in Afghanistan once the Taliban consolidates control and they really start cleaning up what they, everybody who was against them to begin with. There's going to be retribution. We know that. So it's, to me, the parallel to Vietnam, a lot of people are drawing that, right? Last helicopters out of Saigon, all those kinds of things. And it makes me wonder, because we hear about 22 a day, 22 veterans a day on average are taking their own lives, dealing with PTS but the largest number of veterans who are taking their own lives are from the Vietnam era. It's not the young kids today. It's not the ones who are coming back. It's the ones that have been living with it for a few decades now. So, are we looking at, is this going to impact on Vietnam veterans? Are we going to see a spike in suicides in Vietnam veterans taking their own lives? Or are we going to see in 30 years or 40 years a spike of Afghanistan veterans who've just, not been able to deal with it anymore, become a spike in taking their own lives in 30 or 40 years? I mean, this is a multi-generational impact issue, and I just don't think the politicians, the executives who run things like the VA, and even the generals and admirals who are at the Pentagon now really appreciate what's going to happen.
I think you're right, and no one knows what's going to happen. What I'm hoping happens this time versus Vietnam is that there's enough, for lack of a better term, early detection or warning systems in place to raise issues sooner, that when someone is going through a hard time, both family members who are civilians and those military buddies can understand those symptoms and either reach out for help or point them to help or get them the help they need. There shouldn't be an excuse this time as to why someone doesn't get help unless they absolutely do not want it. So that's what I'm hoping happens differently. But I just think it's the reason I like talking to people who do what you do and serve in the way you serve. It's so very different from other types of therapy because it's very hands-on. The horse doesn't judge you. It's one thing that I've noticed. The horses really don't. You're this way or that way. You're coming with this baggage on. I'm not going to deal with you. The horse will. It seems like Rob will kind of meet you where you are, and then work from there. It's really, really when you see it and experience it, it really changes you. It seems like.
Yeah, one of the things we work with is helping somebody identify their authentic self, because you can't bullshit a horse. If you can walk in there, you can walk in there, you can walk in there and smile and act like everything's fine, but the horse will sense what's going on inside of you. He'll know you're being dishonest. He'll know you're not presenting your authentic self, and he will consider you either not worth his time or a threat. And either way, he's not going to bond with you and he's not going to pay attention to you. He'll walk away and, the grass is more interesting than you are, and he'll let you know that. So yeah, it's a very valid point you bring up. And that's, I think, tying back to what you said just a few minutes ago as well. One of the big things I try to work with in coaching especially with veterans, is not necessarily changing, but noticing. Right? Just, before we get into the round pen, before we start working with the horse, I want to work you through some exercises and experiences where you notice what's going on in your body so that you can notice what's going on in the horse's body and carry that with you when you leave so that you can notice what's going on in the people around you. It's sometimes people are reaching out for help. We just don't notice it.
Yeah.
Because our senses aren't as sharp as a horse's senses are, as a prey animal, right? We're not heightened and sensitized that way. So that's one of the things I like to be able to carry away from working with folks.
Well, I would encourage anyone, watching this show or, listening, or, if you can't meet Robert in Wyoming, check out equestrian therapy places in your area, see what it's all about. Maybe you'll get inspired and be PASS certified like Robert is. It's a very, very arduous process. It's not easy, but understand what these wonderful animals can do for us. Would you encourage them? Yeah. Yeah.
And, you bring that up, PATH, Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship. Look at that website, pathinternational.org, pathintl.org. And they'll help you find an equine center that focuses on veterans programs, trauma programs, just anything and everything. I've worked with, as a volunteer in some organizations that work with kids with special needs, physical and mental development issues. And just watching the kids, really light up when they're on the back of a horse and start dealing with things that way. It's just it's a wonderful, wonderful feeling.
Well, speaking of horses, I might be riding my iron horse out there in
All right.
2022 to Wyoming to see Brian. Would love to meet you and see you in action. And
Yep.
I'm sure Brian's found every Marine in his AO. That'd be pretty cool. But again, Robert, I just want to say thank you for being flexible to talk with me this weekend. I love these kind of stories, and I think it just, again, the reason why is it's somebody taking action and continuing to serve, even though they've left the service. So thank you.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to kind of geek out on this, because this, I really love talking about this. If anybody starts me talking about horses, they can't stop me. And yeah, anybody who hears the program, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook. If they want to reach out through you to get a hold of me, forward them my way. I'm willing to get on the road and go to a center where some veterans are who might want to experience some of this. But yeah, anybody's always welcome out here in Wyoming, and I got my own iron horse. So when you get here, maybe we'll go out to the Badlands or up to Mount Rushmore, and we'll see what's going on up there.
Speaking Travis, Master Guns. All right. So just good stuff. And thanks. I call him Moses for a reason. It's an old nickname, but thank you, Brian, for linking Master Gunny and myself up, and just thank you for your time again. And as we say in Oscar Mike Radio, we are mission in flight. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Travis. Take care.